I've lived many, many years in New York, but I'm actually from your neck of the woods. I grew up in Tijuana and San Isidro, and I went to college in Berkeley. So, although I'm a New Yorker through and through, you got to know where the roots are. Somehow I just wound up here. I'm not even sure how. But I have great warmth and memories of your neighborhood at Sweetwater Zen Center. And I have to say, I owe so much of my practice and my understanding of Zen through my many years of friendship with Seisen Roshi. She guided me at ZCLA and Mountain Center in the very early days of my serious practice. And we practiced together with Bernie, laughing all the way. And later, as she mentioned, we bunked together at Zuioji Monastery, where we received our quick and dirty Japanese training. And after then, always she's my go-to person for all Dharma matters. Whenever I have a question, I call up Seisen. And she's always supported me in my practice. So we have a lot of fun together, I think. Thank you for your teaching, Seisen. Great. And you guys are so lucky to have her as a teacher. It's wonderful. So I thought that I would offer, Seisen sort of whispered in my ear, she'd like to hear a little something about Dogen. So I thought that I would give you some thoughts on my favorite text. It's a very old one that helps with our practice as we sit on the cushion. And I'm sure you may be familiar with Dogen's Genjo koan, known as the koan of everyday life, or the koan of actualizing the fundamental point. Imagine what that would be like, to actualize the fundamental point of Zen, to actually be that. So the titles themselves even tip us off that it's about our life today. There's, 900-year-old text that's about our life today. So that's why I call it the koan of showing up. Showing up in every aspect of our lives. Showing up in our own hearts. Being true to ourselves. Showing up in our personal relationships and in our Zen practice. And as an integral part of everything that is. I can't resist saying showing up at the polls next week. Be sure and show up at the polls. Showing up as a bodhisattva. Or these days, because I'm so politically curated these days, showing up as a bodhisattva citizen. So Dogen's Genjo koan helps me to serve as a bodhisattva citizen in my little Zen boat. There's this image in Zen of a boat or a raft that carries people across the sea of suffering. It's a very old Buddhist trope. How to navigate the troubles of the waters of the world that we live in. How do we manage these difficult times? And what is our role in it? Are we mere witnesses? Or do we have some obligation to act? Maybe like me and so many other practitioners, Maybe your practice was initially motivated by an intense yearning to free yourself. I know I wanted to free myself and free myself from my fears and my anxieties and annoyances. It was personal. That was the bait, and I took it. I'm going to practice Zen to calm myself, to soothe myself, to save myself. But what I learned was that through the years, the practice opens our minds and our hearts in a way that gives us courage. Courage to serve all sentient beings, no matter how modest our own aspirations may be. So Dogen wrote about this in a poem that he wrote. He wrote, "What can I accomplish? Although not yet a Buddha, let my body be the raft to carry sentient beings to the yonder shore." What can I accomplish? Think of that in terms of your spiritual practice. What can I accomplish? Although not a Buddha, let my body be the raft to carry sentient beings to the yonder shore. You know, it's a humble wish to let one's own body serve to awaken others, to awaken them to the reality of the interpenetrated universe, where nothing is separate. Nothing exists without all the rest in each moment. If we wish to save ourselves by default, we begin by saving others. I was inspired by this. And I wrote this the other day. I thought I was strong enough to swim across by myself. Yet somehow it was easier to row the boat with all of us outside, across the flowing waters. I'll read it again. I thought I was strong enough to swim across by myself. Yet somehow it was easier to row the boat with all of us outside, across the flowing waters. I encourage our practice in community. It's not something we just do on our own. Those two poem thoughts, Dogen's and my humble one, across continents and 850 years, both evoke what each of us can reveal as we walk on the Buddha way. The Buddha way that Dogen outlines in his Genjo Koan. Perhaps the most famous lines in the Genjo Koan are, "To study the way of enlightenment is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. When actualized by myriad things, your body and mind, as well as the bodies and minds of others, drops away." To study the way of enlightenment is to study the self. And we always want to go over there and grab something when it's here. It's in us. And then he says, to study the self is to forget the self. Don't get too caught up with the grandiosity. To forget the self is to be actualized by the myriad things, to recognize our interpenetration with everything, past and future, near and far. We get that we can begin with the self, but what is that actualized by myriad things? Isn't it when we encounter the vast network of connections that brought us to this moment right now? It's 2:17 p.m. in New York City. It must be like 12:17 where you are. What brought us to this point at this point? All the connections. Someone just driving by Sweetwater Zen Center, well, maybe I will stop and sit. Someone who's been practicing for 40 years. Yeah, maybe I'll sit today. Consider the luck, the twists of fate that converged on you today to be in this Zendo at this time. There's no way to separate ourselves, a separate me, from all that we encounter, all that we live with and through. And because of that, our practice deepens. We begin to realize our responsibility to serve all creations. Yeah, sometimes it's not so easy. We can become maybe overwhelmed by the enormity of the task or the sheer horror of the suffering we may witness. And we may not know how to serve. On the other hand, we might march right out and cause more harm through our unskillfulness, our anger, or our fear. Or we may dissipate our energy by racing from one campaign to another. Or, worst case, we may just fall into a selfish net of anger, greed, or pessimism. How do we discern the appropriate course that will, in fact, ferry us and other beings across the sea of suffering? One strategy that helps me on this, when I start to get a little down about after reading the newspaper, is to remember the lines in the Genjo Koan that remind us of the impermanence of everything. The impermanence of she who wants to serve, as well as that which needs serving. Dogen writes, when you ride in a boat and watch the shore, you might assume that the shore is moving. We've all experienced that, I think. But when you keep your eyes closely on the boat, you can see that the boat moves. Similarly, if you examine myriad things with a confused body and mind, you might suppose that your mind and essence are permanent. When you practice intimately and return to where you are, it will be clear that nothing at all has an unchanging self. You know what he's saying? But the moment to moment change, when you ride in a boat and watch the shore, you think the shore is moving. We've all experienced that kind of thing. But when you look carefully, you see, oh, I'm moving. I'm in the boat and I'm moving. When you see the suffering around you, you have to look to see where you are in that story. Nothing at all has an unchanging self. And, impermanence is crucial to remember. But what we fail to see is often the process of our activities, that we ourselves are constantly changing. And our views, and our principles and our actions are affected. For example, when we began a project to offer the Dharma to someone, our original intention may be a humble offering of zazen. But as we offer that, we realize that in the process, we change and our offering changes. Or in terms of the current political situation, when we rage at fake news, we may need to stop and observe how we ourselves enjoy bathing in news that agrees with our views. Ah, so true, so true. And how through our use of media, we may become a tuning fork only to what we want to hear, on what fits into our worldview. So important to remind ourselves over and over again that we too are changing in each moment. And indeed, this realization helps us steer our own boat through the troubled waters of these times. You know, Dogen follows that example of the moving ship and the shore, our relationship to time, to the reality around us, to his profound teaching of life and death, called Firewood and Ash, firewood being life, ash, the death. He says, firewood and ash, firewood becomes ash, and it doesn't become firewood again. Yet do not suppose that the ash is after and the firewood before. Understand that firewood abides in its condition of firewood, which fully includes before and after, while it is independent of before and after. Ash abides in its condition as ash, which fully includes before and after. Just as firewood does not become firewood again after it is ash, you do not return to birth after death. I love this section because he firmly throws away the whole rebirth problem in the last sentence. It seems to me that Dogen is offering us a profound teaching, but it's what is commonly called being in the moment. Dogen is reminding us that in each moment of our lives, we can be free of our conceptual frameworks that posit a fixed past or a fixed future. You know, our normal, natural human brains want to make patterns and formulas, cause and effect. But Dogen is reminding us that in each moment, there is a world of just this, a world of possibility, not constrained by our ideas of what should be. Just this. And Dogen has a word for this, Juhoi, Dharma position, or suchness, just this. It's like those old animation decks of cards that if you flip through them rapidly, they appear to display movement. But actually, when you look closely, each card is still and only slightly different from the one before and the one after. Each one, as in each moment, is wholly and complete in its Dharma position, in its Juhoi. You and me, right now, in San Diego, in New York, and in other places, Right now, that's our juhoi. And what does that teach us? That each action we take, each moment of our lives is wholly and completely just this, as it is, ready and present for creative change. That whole idea that we have of persistence, of continuity, is what we create in our minds, in our thoughts, in our memories. Each thing is what it is. I am what I am. I am no longer the child riding my horse in Tijuana, the 60 students, the young mother, the professor. I am just now an old woman, zooming with you from New York to California. I'm retired. Retired? What's happening now? Traces remain, memories, our wounds, our blessings, but it is the realization of the undivided nature of the Dharma, of our Dharma position, right now, that gives us freedom and the creativity and the possibility. In each moment, we can serve without depending on persistence or outcome, but as a manifestation of this moment you, as you are now. And so I'll offer a possibility to those of you in the San Diego area. You must be bearing witness to the suffering of those who seek a better future by immigrating to the US. I remember from the time I was 6 till I was 12 years old, I rode in a station wagon with 4 other girls in Catholic school uniform as we crossed the border back and forth every day. Tijuana to school in San Isidro and back to Tijuana. A different time. I mean, there were only two streams of traffic, one going one way and one going the other way. But even then, crossing the border, the guards, the guns, the attitude toward our Mexican drivers, a faint sense of danger was always there as we crossed. And we were privileged. Just imagine, after having crossed the Darien Gap through Central America, through all the cons and frights, to finally cross over to the US and find yourself, if you're lucky, in a homeless shelter in San Diego. So many are escaping from violence and poverty, looking for a healthy life that can support their families. They've traveled long and now find themselves controlled in small spaces, surrounded by rumors and language that they do not understand. There's hunger and fear and fatigue. It is a dark and difficult journey. And it is right where you are in San Diego. Living so close to the border, you are called to bear witness to the moment-to-moment hunger and despair of those who would cross over. Merely by your juhoi, as we would say in Zen, your Dharma situation, where you are in the world at this time, you are implicated. You are responsible. So I urge you to find a way, no matter how small, to offer your paddle to move that boat. It is indeed, as Dogen says, when we look carefully at the shore, we recognize that we too are moving. And in that moving, we are in our own juhoi, our own Dharma position. And it is from there that we can be of use. It is from there that we can serve. So forgive my lecture. I get a little hot under the collar about things sometimes. But I'll end with a gatha that might smooth things over. Like fish in a little water, we have just a fleeting moment to serve, to help, to row that boat. Let's go. Thank you.